Aha, we are live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to another scene for the living world of darkness, rage across New York. We are setting scene on the Sept of the Green, where, 10 Point is doing how 10 Point do, but the real question is, what is Jason doing?
Jason has taken a moment to, man up and stop crying because he had a little bit of a rough morning talking to Helena, and he may not have as much pride as he used to, but there's appearances are important and all that. And also, it's cold and it's like freezing on his nose. So, now dries himself off, kind of muscles up, and we'll actually go find 10 Point because the sun is thoroughly above the horizon at this point, and it's time to take care of some shrines.
And considering that they have a fairly regular interaction going, he will have zero issue finding 10 Point. I imagine he meets with her each day at the Cairnheart because it is, for one, just a smart place to start and an easy place to find, but more importantly, it is a very easy place for even a Homid-born cub to step across. So, yes, we will set scene in the Umbra for the sake of convenience because I fucking say so.
It's
And
actually handy dandy because he was already in the Umbra with Helena at the sparring grounds, so it saves our slightly nervous, not very good at crossing the gauntlet cub from having to do it again.
it does. But yes. So we will start Umbra side, which will in part explain why 10 Point is just going about her business in breed form, which she has begun to do more and more, he'll notice. Um, but yeah, she will be there, likely, as she often is, wrapping up a conversation with many, many little white mice spirits, who she has brought those horrible, cheap, prepackaged, like, cheese and peanut butter crackers, because you know what? They're fucking tasty.
Those things are delicious. Don't you
Yeah.
knock my
They're fucking tasty. So she has busted open a couple of those, and the crackers have been scattered around, and there are little mouse spirits nibbling away, having a good old time. And so as Jason comes about, she will be rousing from her crouch and tucking the plastic wrapping back into her swag for later disposal. And we'll
He does not
offer.
have any offerings for the tiny mouse spirits other than the crumbs left over from breakfast that are probably still stuck in his clothes. Um, but
Don't think for a
he's
second they won't
disposed
go
of
for
it, probably. He's a little twitchy if they end up trying to crawl up the inside of his pants leg, but otherwise we're okay. He disposed of the trash from breakfast earlier, however, so he will greet 10 Point respectfully as always, but at this point he has already perhaps problematically gotten out of the habit of formally submitting to much of anyone, with the probable exception of the Den Father and, like murder hobo.
as
So
long as there's some cursory gesture. 10 Point doesn't seem especially fussed with formal greetings, at least in regards to herself. Perhaps if he were to repeat the process of neglecting it to another guru, she would shift her attitude. But at least when it comes to meeting, particularly because they do so on the daily, and he's always polite, she doesn't see the need to press it. Probably being one of the reasons that she is enabling this, or, in a way, making her an enabler of his neglect to do so.
it'll bite him in the ass eventually. Until then, however.
Assuredly.
But yes, good morning, Raya.
Good morning, Anrai.
I hope the snow will not cause too much trouble for our work this morning.
Gives her big headish shake. And just for funsies, in light of the season, 10 Point has traded out her bells. She normally has very generic little jingly bells. Though for the last little bit, probably from a bit just before Christmas, she has switched out for whatever reason to having one or two large reindeer bells attached to the base of either of her antlers rather than the smaller ones up on the further expanses of either antler. So she makes a much heartier jingle when she gives that head a shake. No.
Well, they are noticed, despite his callous regard for formal submission. He has not yet elected to inquire about the bells and will not do so today, although his eyes kind of flick up and he looks a bit puzzled because it's still a bit confusing.
I don't know. She seems to be, well, she is, in fact, having a good bit of fun letting the cubs come around to asking their awkward questions rather than volunteering them. So she'll catch the glance probably, but will not remark on it and will heave herself up to begin, in fact, right back towards the entrance to the Cairn Heart. Though she will, comically enough, probably at least initially trot along on all fours, as Krynos is, well, it's a very forgiving form when it comes to choosing between bipedal and quadrupedal locomotion.
He will just follow along on his feet because he is in Hamid now that his mandatory lupus time is expired.
Oh, and how long has it expired?
It was 3 days, but I don't actually remember when it started.
Well, it is over now, so fuck it.
Yep.
But yeah, she'll putter along, probably still right about head-to-head level with him, even crouched down. Then we'll comment, maybe just a touch teasingly, as they go. I see they're letting you choose your shape again.
It's good to spend time in lupus. It helps me learn how to move and how to behave. So I still do both, but this will probably always be more comfortable, Raya.
Very probably. But I think you'll find it is easier to find peace in lupus.
That has been the case so far, yes.
The big muzzle bobs in thought. Do you have any new questions, Onrai? Anything that has been taught to you that you wish further explanation?
And he answers with that same grin that he has every time anyone asks if he has questions, because the answer is still always, oh yes, all of them. Because it seems like every time anyone answers one of his questions here, he just comes up with 10 more. But the grin fades after a moment and he kind of hesitates. I do, but it is a very personal thing to ask.
And again, that big head of hers shifts a bit. She doesn't get any closer per se, but she does twist it about just enough to put him squarely in the view of one big golden eye. Ask, Onrai.
Everyone has a different opinion for what a metis is. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their purpose. Tlatahin Raya was very firm in her opinion. Others have been very firm in opposing opinions. but none of them seem to come with evidence is the wrong word, but facts, logic. Beyond that, each metis has a deformity. That much is the only thing anyone can agree on.
And she draws at a breath and kind of heaves a sigh, not at the question, but particularly at the final comment. And she eases her head forward again. And overall, the expression and the posture still fairly neutral, fairly normal. I think you will find, Anrai, that there are few, very few things that all tribes agree on, that all Guru agree on. We fight the worm. We all agree on this. And the violation of the cairn is the highest of crimes. We all agree on this. Everything else is complicated.
He nods, since that's logical, if perhaps not, the nice, solid answer that one might hope for.
The facts of it are very simple, Anrai. Metis are born of two Guru. All Metis suffer, whether it is physically, mentally. Some do not have visible signs. But their malady makes itself known. All Metis are sterile. So
and
we
that
are...
is its own problem for the future of the nation.
Bobs her big head. Consider, Onrai, that when a Metis is born, we are born in this shape. You can imagine what this means for the mother. With very precious rare exceptions, Onrai, we end a life as we begin ours, and we can create no more life for the nation. And in many cases, depending on the tribe, often the sire is hunted down as well, and punished to varying degrees. Every Metis comes into the world responsible for one life, or two.
He looks like he wants to argue with that, but knows better than to do so. But in this instance, she probably has no difficulty reading his expression, although the words are swallowed down quite firmly.
Oh, she doesn't. She has heard similar things many, many times since entering the sept, so it doesn't puzzle her as much anymore. But she does catch a glimpse. And as such, certainly doesn't wax poetic.
That aside, what is it like? What does Metis mean to you? Sterility, deformity, birth aside. What is it to live as a Metis?
Well, this time she tilts her head further around, still ambling. They're probably, as they speak, going to various shrines. And at least Umbraside, it's not simply tending the physical aspect of the shrine itself, but it's vague interactions with the spirits there, perhaps pausing to indulge them in some small way, not usually offering up gnosis, but generally just making sure they are happy or at least content. Here, one moment. Got my pre-scene yawn late. But this is one of those points where she will actually turn to properly give him a look, not just the side glance. And while a Krynos face does not lend well to smiling, he'll have been in her company enough to, especially as she takes the form more and more, perhaps become more familiar with the expressions, and he can assuredly catch at least a tinge of amusement in the big golden eyes. You know, Anrai, you were the first to ask this question. All of these grew, all of these opinions. I come from a very different place. And all that I speak to ask me leading questions because they feel they already know the answers. And finally, she'll take a pause, perhaps shifting off of their usual walked course to take a seat where a fairly large conifer of some sort has spared the ground the worst of the snow blanketing. It's a thin layer. And she plops down in it to actually properly indulge the question.
And he'll settle down across from her, avoiding as much of the snow as he can for the sake of his pants.
But it's magic umber snow. It's perfect and fluffy, and it doesn't make your pants wet. Yay. I don't know why I've decided this is a thing, but it's now.
Totally a thing.
It's totally a thing. Umber snow is weird. It's magic. So, yeah, comically enough, he can settle alongside her, and for some inexplicable reason, perhaps because it is the aspect of snow more than it is properly physically snow itself. It just stays fluffy and nice and doesn't get all melty and soaky. Which is kind of weird if you really pause to think about it, but all in all, a minor detail. But once she's settled down and he's settled down, she'll glance aside again. You're familiar with where I come from, Anrai? Yes?
Not really. No, Raya. Not really.
My Rayas and I, we come from Ireland. They from the Sept of Silvertara, and I from the Sept of the Tri-Spiral. These are very old septs, very traditional septs, the very old beliefs. They are very different from here, very strikingly different. Have you seen creatures of the worm, Anrai? Have you seen many?
Not the bad ones, I don't think. They've told me about thunderworms and giant things, but I've only seen little banes and fomori and people so far.
And in looking on these creatures, have you noticed all things touched by the worm are twisted physically?
The poachers weren't. They still looked like normal humans.
It takes time for worm taint to truly attach itself to things. Not all things of the worm will be worm tainted, Onrai, and this is important for you especially to understand as a Philodox.
And he nods cautiously.
Consider, Onrai, I could just now walk out of this sept. I could slaughter a crowd of people. Not for any reason, simply because I wish to. I would not suddenly walk back onto this sept, tainted by the worm. But there is no questioning that to do so would be a wormish action. It is a behavior that is of the worm. It is destructive, senselessly so. So, you will find with things like poachers, perhaps they have begun to be tainted, but it takes time for it to swell into something big enough to twist them. I imagine that you dealt with these poachers, yes?
Yes.
She kind of tilts her head faintly.
It it was the matter was decided for us after a fashion. But yes.
Were they tainted by the worm?
So I am told. It is not something I can sense.
Hmm. Had you
But that
left them, and were they truly tainted? With time, as they indulged the urges put before them by the worm, they would have become twisted. The worm's touch eventually shows.
understood.
The Fianna are a very old tribe, Unrai. And we learned very early that this trend was a reliable way to identify the touch of the worm. Can you imagine then what we think of Metis?
I have been told. Yes. Right.
And she gives a bit of a nod. To make a Metis, Unrai, particularly knowing that it breaches the litany, particularly knowing that the parents will suffer, that the child will suffer. It is a selfish action, an action that is, in a way, of the worm. We are closer to Gaia, perhaps, than humans. We are reared in the nation. But that touch, that temptation, we carry it with us. We are born from it. It is not to say that all Metis will fall, but the temptation is there, and it is strong. A caring pack keeps a close eye. It ensures that we do not fall to temptation. And she'll be gauging his expression all the while, of course. Just
He
kind of
looks.
trying to read as various comments are made, like whether there's recognition, whether there's disgust with particular parts of it.
He looks thoughtful. Um, Depending on just how much attention she's been paying to his generally read me like a book face, she may gain a certain suspicion that this is not the first time he has heard this. And that to some degree, the questions have been asked for confirmation as much as anything else.
Do not think, Anrai, that I believe that all Metis will fall, and that we cannot accomplish great things. But I think you will find, if you ask, if you speak to the Galliards, that most Metis that have gained recognition in the nation have gained it posthumously.
Would it be fair to say, perhaps, that one who can more readily hear Gaia may also be more open to other things then?
And the head slowly swivels, not into a curious tilt so much as that slight thoughtful cant. Perhaps further distinguished by the fact that her ears flit back a bit as she is thinking rather than listening. It is not an unreasonable conclusion to draw in this case, Anrai. But by the same token, the Lupus have a closer connection to Gaia than even the Metis.
And he nods. Still very thoughtful. And clearly a bit conflicted. It's not perhaps, well, many things that he has learned in the past month were not things he wanted to hear. They are not the answers he wanted to be given.
She can appreciate this. And she will continue. You are familiar now with gifts that spirits have aged many, many generations old contracts with different tribes, with different breeds, with different auspices. She glances his way for confirmation.
He nods.
Do you think perhaps, Onrai, that there's a reason that learning to sense the worm becomes so natural to a Metis?
You make valid points, Raya. And I thank you for your frankness in answering a question that I had trouble putting to words.
I can tell that it is a hard thing for the people of this place to hear. And it is a hard thing to accept, Onrai. But the worm knows its own. I have seen it. I have heard it. I have been tempted. I am not above reproach. And she will especially engage, and in fact, I will start being a good sport about it and rolling some P&E. I will make sure I remember my stats. Oh, there you go. That is 2 successes worth of kind of carefully studying, particularly as she confesses her own trials.
He knows. There is no surprise in his expression. Only sadness, perhaps, to have it confirmed.
And she'll go on. I can at least take pride, Anrei, in turning away from the temptation I was offered. But I was not surprised by it, and it will happen again.
I suspect, Raya, that temptation comes to all of us.
And she gives
I
a
hope
hefty bow of head.
that it is as easy to recognize, if easy it was, when it comes to me. And then it can be resisted.
At this point, she kind of lets out a breath and leans back a bit, actually thumping her back into the tree that they are nested under. Kind of deflating a bit, almost, having to face the idea. Obviously, that temptation will be there, and, well, even the cubs are not immune. You will find, Anrei, that the worm is cloying, and it will offer you what you want most. But the things that it offers are too good to be real. And there will always be some small seed, some small cue that shows you it is a lie. What it offered me was something I wanted dearly, very dearly. But the way that this offer was made to me made it very clear that I was not seeing who I believed I was seeing. They would never have said the things that this image said to me, even if I had wanted to hear them. They were not real and could not be.
And he nods slowly. Very obviously, a part of him imagining himself in whatever his version of such a situation might be.
And she does ease back for a few moments, particularly as he kind of gets that. What's the
It's
term?
that same stare that he has had periodically for the last month. Everyone probably recognizes it at this point, and then he kind of stops and shakes himself and sighs.
And he'll find when he does shake himself out of it, she will wait that long. But particularly as he sighs, as he shakes off, well, the subject of his thoughts. You'll find the big hefty paw of a hand comes to fall, well, surprisingly gently on his shoulder, considering she's got this massive paw, these great curved talons. There's something to be said for wearing a form you were born in. And there is no threat to the gesture. The fingers are even stiffened in such a way that the most he will ever feel of the claw is the blunted curve. But still, it's something of a. Well, it's meant to be reassuring.
It seems to work. To what extent it can. And he'll kind of, his shoulders slump a little bit, and then in a gesture that is honestly more wolf than human, kind of lean over and just nudge his head against her arm, and then kind of slip sideways out from under her hand. I think, Raya, I need to go and ponder what you have told me. I will, if it is no trouble, finish the rest of the shrines that I usually tend later.
Of course, Andre.
I thank you again for your frankness.
I thank you for opening your ears, Andre. It is rare here for people to ask a question and to listen to the answer with any intention except to defy the explanation given.
And he kind of gives her this lopsided, not very effective smile. I do not promise that the conclusion I come to will not be defiance, Raya.
I have not been able to stop any of the others. I doubt I could stop you if you set your mind to it. Whatever the case, it does me good to be aware of the temptation and to be vigilant.
Vigilance will harm no one, I think. And that, at the very least, I will keep with me, regardless of my other conclusions, Raya.
And she considers for a moment and finally kind of gives her shoulders a roll as though kind of almost as if shaking off an uncomfortable thought, feeling. It's kind of anyone's guess. For what it is worth, Andre, the worm tempts everyone, yes. An example of my concern is the fact that before the assault on the hellhole, when we were out at the fringes of its effects, we went on a rescue mission. And while my packmates were clear-headed, all the others on the mission were clear-headed. Even then, I heard the whispers and I felt the call. I feared going into the hellhole, Anrai, more than most. If I had done so hastily and without preparing myself, it is very possible that once we stepped inside, I would have been lost to the influence of the worm. I found my own anchors. But it did not keep it from trying, and it did not keep it from calling. I do not say these things simply because I feel what I feel, or I think I know. I have seen evidence enough.
And he nods. With perhaps a certain amount of understanding. He may have not promised to follow through in full abeyance to her words, but it is very clear that he will certainly not forget them.
And with that, particularly as he has said he would like some time to mull it over. She will begin heaving herself up out of the snow, and will, in fact, as she gets up properly to her feet this time, rather than kind of dusting off as a human often does, will actually give more of a canine shake, spraying powder, well, at least from the lower half of her, a good several inches off to any given side as she shakes it from her fur.
He doesn't actually bother to dust himself off at all, but gives her a kind of a half bow. And then we'll take a moment to concentrate and actually shift into lupus, as it has been suggested before repeatedly, that sometimes it offers a clearer head and a different perspective while he considers things.
And she will in turn offer a bob of the muzzle, polite, and go ahead and begin meandering again, the familiar pattern that they take on any given day.
And Jason,
so she'll call back over her shoulder. Take what time you need, Unrai. There will always be more time to tend the shrines and the spirits.
And Jason will go running.
And so with one massive humanoid canid lumbering in one direction, and one much smaller lupine bounding in another, I dare say it is a good time to end our scene. So I will say thank you, players, for playing, and watchers for watching. And we will see you next time on the Living World of Darkness, Rage Across New York.